Okay. Thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulty. We basically have suspended the meeting, and I believe now we're back live. And I think the where we stopped, I believe, is Mr. Craven. You were kind of asking about the numbers of it, what was in the Mr. T money or the maintenance repair money this year.
Yeah, essentially, what was taken out of that? What did we not get to spend in the capital outlay of the 4.6, and I think the number's around 1.7 of projects that are put on hold for the 1920 year, correct?
Correct, sir. Yes, sir. And then, of course, next year's roughly 4.6 is being frozen at this time, too. But once again, I just want you to understand that that money and those projects are not going away. It is something that is there, but yet right now, with so many unknowns, and I don't know how many times that we've talked about what is the unknowns here, and there's so many, this is one of those things that working with Mr. Wyatt and the county commissioners, that we'll come back and look at this in January to see where we are. And then, but you also got to remember, looking at this, he has allocated us an additional $1 million in our budget, going from 28.3 in current expense to 29.3 in current expense, to make sure that we have money to take care of what we need to take care of this year as a school system, even though there are so many unknowns out there, that he doesn't want us to feel to have to come back to them or be short, because he understands the predicament that we're in. That right now we don't know, right? We still are currently under the same budget. We don't know if there's going to be a new budget passed. We don't know what the funding is going to look like in January. We don't know what kind of other capital projects are going to all of a sudden surface with this. So that's why if you go look right now, will be currently in current expense. How will the $1 million be allocated? And I'm going to go through it. And Bernie, if you don't mind, Mr. Socia, Chief Finance Officer, take us through the top four, if you don't mind, very quickly, and kind of let the board know about the top four.
Sure. Yeah. The top one, the last time we talked about it, usually salary and benefit increase. Well, right now it's just benefit increase, and those are numbers that were actually approved in the current year in one of those little mini budgets that they passed to increase the retirement and hospitalization rate up to 21.4% for the retirement rate for next year, and $6,600 for the insurance per person. So calculating that out, it's going to be about $325,000 of our current personnel to pay for that increase. Charter schools, well, if we get more money from the county, we have to share that with the charter schools, and they are continuing to grow. So we have an additional $70,000 there. Utility increase, we've been told a couple different times there may or may not be an increase. It's kind of fluctuated a little bit, as well as we do have a new larger school in the system, which is going to cost us a little bit more money. And our financial software is showing a price increase for next year. They're getting in line with this modernization, so they have hopped on board, and they're increasing $2 a student to the cost for us to have our software. $70,000.
Mr. Socia has told us, right, thank you, yeah, $470 just to basically pay for things that we've got to pay for. There's no we can't. I mean, these are just issues that are going to come across. If you look, and Mr. Socia has talked to us about the $25,000 for a couple of years, the state of North Carolina is moving to a completely modernization plan. That was kind of getting its wings under them until all of a sudden COVID-19 hit, and you've not heard much about it lately. I haven't. So therefore, we were going to drag our feet on this one and not do anything with this update, and hopefully the new modernization plan would come through, and we wouldn't have to deal with it. Well, unfortunately, COVID-19 has come, and this has stop that. So now we're at, we've got to do this, because if there's one system we do not want to go down, is our payroll system and our finance system. And so therefore that is a requirement. The other two items, and this is the only two items that you're going to see at this point right now, is when I first became superintendent, I just felt like there was a huge gap and we needed to provide more assistant principals, especially for our elementary schools. And at this point, we're one short. We have used Western Carolina admins to help us and using those kind of on loan. Western Carolina does not have any ones that want to do this in our area right now. And so to basically complete our elementary school, we need to add an additional assistant principal at $70,000. This one is almost a COVID-19 that we've talked about. It's when we sent over 7,000 Chromebooks home, and we're having to undo all the Chromebooks in the carts. And then we got to get 7,000 Chromebooks back. We've got to then turn around, and we'll talk about the school calendar for next year, about 5 remote learning days that the state is requiring us to take. We just don't have enough technicians in our technology department, and we continue to add technology, but we're not adding enough people to work on those. And so therefore, that's $60,000 there. What does that leave? Where else are we going to budget our money? Well, I've got one line item. It's $400,000. And to me, that's unknown expenditures for what I call reentry. And you can call it what you want to. You can call it COVID-19 funds. You can call it, like I said, reentry funds. But to be honest with you, right now, it's the unknowns. I can't tell you what August is going to look like for when our students come back. I can't tell you what we're going to have to deal with. I can't tell you the bills that we're going to have to face. Also, to be honest with you, with the Mr. T money being frozen, there may be roofs, there may be air conditioned systems that all of a sudden shut down that might have been in that Mr. T money. There's the $400,000. And so I, as a superintendent, I'm making a recommendation to you would be to not itemize that, not have any expenditures, but just put it into a line item, knowing that when we're getting ready to spend anything out of that, it will be brought to you for your approval. We will not do any type of spending out of that $400,000 without the board knowing what's going in there and knowing what's going to be expenditured, if that makes sense. My recommendation would be, after looking at this and after talking with Bernie late yesterday, but I didn't want to totally tear up the whole presentation, is to move the $400,000 to capital. And so therefore, what you would see in current expense would not be a $1 million increase, would be $600,000, and then turn around, and the $400,000 would then be in capital. So we'd have an increase, or we would have capital at 1.9 million instead of 1.5. And I just feel like there are going to be more capital issues come up, either roofs. I don't see us spending $400,000 on personnel at this point, because with so many unknowns, and then if you don't have enough money the following year, I just would feel better putting it in $400,000 after we talked late yesterday afternoon, Mr. Socia and I. And so I would like to change that before Monday night, but that would certainly be we can certainly at the end talk about that when we get to the board in your discussion.
So do we have a line item anywhere, depending on what condition the Chromebooks come back to us? And do we have money to repair them?
Well, I think what you're going to see is Mr. Fender does get some state money, not a lot. As he calls it, he gets some pennies on the dollar until this coming year. And then, of course, I think they realized if they're going to require us to do learn from home, then they've all of a sudden started providing some more technology funds. He does have some state money for some repairs. And to be honest with you, you're going to see we're going to continue to have the $300,000 in our capital dollars. So that's also repair money. This is new for us, Coach. We've been kind of making sure that they stayed in school, and we tried to take care of them. But there's a new day, and we're talking about now that eventually we're spending this money on technology that these things are going to have to go home more with kids versus us just keeping them there. So that is a discussion that we're having right now, but there are some funds for him to repair it.
Of the 7,000 that we have out, how many do we have remaining right now?
Do you know? I don't. I couldn't tell you the total.
It's a race to get to 1-to-1, right?
It is a race to get to 1-to-1.
Because if we're going to be required to do 5 remote learning days next year, well, we're going to have to make sure that our students, are
Right.
able to access those.
And Ms. Craven, you're exactly right. And that was a conversation that Mr. Fender and I and the leadership team had yesterday. And we're looking at that and talking about who's going to take them home, what grade levels and those types of things. We're going to make it work. And some have iPads. I mean, we've got some mixed, I hate to use the word for technology, but I always call it stuff. I don't know if that's the right one, but we got iPads, we got old Chromebooks, we got new Chromebooks, we got Chromebooks that you can touch the screen, non-touch screen. It's it's unfortunate that we've done well in technology, but I wish we'd all have everybody'd have the up to latest models, and we just don't.
Raven, that is about half of our Chromebooks.
That's about half of them. Okay.
So we're very close.
In the 10 days extra or more that teachers are going to have next year and kids are going to have next year, is that money already paid, or are we going to have to pay any more for those local teachers with that?
No, ma'am. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, but and we'll get into the calendar Monday night when we go through the General Assembly. But the 10 days, really what they added was 5 additional days to the calendar, which is already in the contract. So in a teacher's contract, they work 215 days. So in reality, they'll have 5 less work days are going to be replaced with 5 student days. So when you look at the calendar, I think that it drops to 9 work days where there used to be 14 different work days. So there's no additional money that's going to be cost. It's just all we're swapping is the 5 student days. Now we got to look at the cost will be the transportation sum that we want to run the buses 5 more days. And Bernie and I once again started talking about that yesterday, as well as what's going to be the additional cost that we have to plan for, which once again, it could be some of that $400,000 where this is just new to us.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because, we clearly didn't run buses as much this year. We have, since March, whatever,
Right.
To now. And from what I understand, we're being held harmless for those dollars, for not using those dollars. So there has to be a surplus that can make up 5 days next year.
So we get our transportation allotment, and we are going to spend every dollar that we receive. That money expires June 30. So we're going to spend everything, because we've still been paying our bus drivers.
So what do we do about fuel?
Fuel, well, we don't get it allotted as fuel money. It just comes in a lump sum. So Mr. Klump is repairing buses and doing all this other stuff. So he's spending the dollars that we have this year because it expires. And then we will get funding next year. Like you said, it's going to be held harmless to the same level, even though that we haven't been running the buses. I'm not going to look at that. So we should be funded similarly next year as we are this year.
Because we were not granted a lot of carryovers. So when the state gives us money, it's an allotment that you either spend it or you lose it.
Right.
And I'm not sure was transportation a carryover or not a carryover? No. So some local dollars and our state dollars, we're going to make sure we spend it, because if not, the state gets it back, and certainly not going to be wasteful with it. But there may be, you're right. The thing is, we can buy more tires, we can buy more batteries, we can buy some of those things that hopefully this year when it comes, we already got that on surplus to hopefully then the state, there'll be more wiggle room in that budget to pay for this.
So what about the TAs? Because usually on the 14 work days, they're not in session, correct?
We've got to look at TA schedules. We've got to look at 10-month schedules. This calendar came out, I think, last Friday. And then just today, I was on a conference call with all superintendents and someone from the representative from the General Assembly explaining to us exactly how this is supposed to work. We're still working through some of their answers that were provided because some of you read it. Is it truly clear? We want to make sure we do it right. So we've not put out a next year's calendar. We're going to get the calendar committee back to go through this calendar for next year on where the days are. But yeah, we're going to look at teacher assistant days and see where they need to be placed and how many. I don't, right now, Bernie, I don't think that they're certainly not going to lose money, because there'll be ample time for them to work the number of work days that they worked.
Okay.
Yeah, we have them in 205-day year.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we will have to look at that as we have the new calendar. That's one of the pieces that we have to look at to see if we do need to make any adjustment to that
Okay.
And if the state makes any adjustment in the funding, I haven't heard of that. I mean, this is all so new. They're just telling us that we're going to get money. They haven't even told us how we're going to get that money.
Okay. I feel better that the teachers don't have those 5 work days now, that they've just, I mean, I know they'll still, they work beyond those work days, but that they don't have 14 work days plus these additional 5 days. That makes me feel a little better.
If you want to just, well, like I said, we'll look at the calendar, but it's 5 student days have replaced 5 teacher work days. And we've got to start on August the 17th. And we'll say that again on Monday night, because that is, we're not going to approve a calendar Monday night because I want to get the calendar committee together. But we do need to let our community know that students will be starting on August the 17th due to the 5 additional days.
So is there 5 work days taken away and then 5 more remote days for kids learning? How's that work?
The 5 remote days are within your 1,025 hours. So if you got to remember, Ms. Case, and try to shift from days to hours, but if you look at it, we are accomplishing our 1,025 hours in approximately 180 days, okay? So therefore, let's just say you got 180 days, those 5 remote learning days are within that 1,025 hours. So that's not an additional days, that the remote learning days is in that 180-day bucket. So in reality, as far as teachers and student engagement, it's going to be a 185-day calendar. 180 days for 1,025 hours plus the 5 additional days.
Why are they doing the remote if we can be in school?
You know, we will talk about that Monday night. That's a great question, Ms. Case, but I think that you're going to hear Dr. King say that we have to come up with a remote learning plan. It's there's 13 steps that we have to show on what we're doing for remote learning. I think that this COVID-19, I think the General Assembly kind of heard that there's some school systems that waited 3 to 4 weeks before they even did learn from home. I mean, and I think the beauty for Henderson County is we took about 3 to 4 days and we put it out there. So, but we're going to be required, just like all the other state systems, is to put a plan out there and show how we're going to teach remote learning, show how we're going to, for kids to be engaged in remote learning. And I guess it's 5 practice days for children to learn how to do remote
We
learning.
practiced enough.
Well, amen. So we'll talk more about that Monday. I'm going to keep going, so then we can continue with questions. Is Dr. Bryant still? He's there. I'm just going to swap chairs with him right quick because here comes Capital, and then we'll go for questions and go from there.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just to go back for just one moment to the Mr. T money that Mr. Caldwell spoke before, and there was a question as it related to the $1.7 million specifically. I want to make sure that you have a clear picture of, really, there are 4 categories of work associated with that. There was the Upward project that was approximately $700,000. There was the Rugby product, which was the Rugby project, which was approximately $500,000. There was the Chromebook allocation, which was $300,000. And then there was about $200,000 remaining contingency monies for each of those projects that were unspent. So that 1.7 total that is yet to be released, when we talk about that project or that dollar amount being on hold, those are the categories that you're talking about for the $1.7 million. As it relates to capital outlay, I'll just remind you, capital outlay really deals with roughly 4 categories. We talk about annual maintenance expenditures that are significant. Those are the things that have to happen on a regular basis that are just part of our scheduled replacements and otherwise. We've given priority to safety enhancements over the last couple of years and identifying elements in our capital budget that specifically address enhancing the school safety elements of our campuses. We also, yes, ma'am.
What does that entail for next year?
I'll be to that.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Mhm.
Sweet.
When I get to those couple of slides, I'll talk about that.
Hold on, wait for the
Yes, ma'am. Wait for the click. There is asset preservation and planning and design. Of course, as we have developed new construction projects, you think about the school construction that's taking place right now and the renovation work, as well as taking care of our facilities. The Joint Facilities Committee really did an outstanding job prioritizing the preservation of our facilities. You all know we have over 2 million square feet of school facilities, and they don't require one-time investments. They require continuing investments. So in order that we're able to preserve those, we have to take care of that. And then, of course, renovation and expansion of those relative facilities. So as we move our way to the next slide, I'll specifically be referencing the categories of the project themselves. And the first of those, if it's all right with Mr. Craven and the board specifically, I'll talk about each of these categories, each of the items that are on the capital outlay, and then you guys ask me questions as we go. Please stop me as we're working through them. You'll see that we identify the site where the capital investment is designated. The specific nature of the project is attempted to be described in column 2, the category that finds itself in 3, and then the rough anticipated cost associated with that based on our past expenditures or projected expenditures. One of those annual costs, the very first one you see, is with the bus garage. We have various number of service trucks that go out and about in our community that our technicians and our mechanics use on an annual basis. One of the things that we have to do is continue to update that fleet. So we try to take care of a vehicle annually every year in our transportation department, our technology department, our maintenance and otherwise department as they start to cycle off. The reason we're taking care of a vehicle a year is because we've gone several years without doing any of them. That was never part of our budget before. Mr. Craven?
15 grand.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
Going to
too.
replace a vehicle?
Yeah, on state contract, we don't get to buy the brand new shiny ones that are, $40, $50, $60,000. Generally, what we're doing is we're buying a base vehicle and then we're customizing it with the equipment that we get on that front. So,
Shop with you.
I know.
yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
Can that not be taken out of that transportation money that we're trying to spend?
It cannot.
Of course not.
Expenditure, yeah.
Common sense.
Yes, that makes too much sense, Ms. Case.
Okay.
That's a great question. But I think it's critical to just revisit what you heard Mr. Soch and Mr. Caldwell say. Many of the state allocated budgets that we're familiar with expire at the end of the year. They are not rollover budgets. And so while we are prioritizing those expenditures right now on things that we've otherwise would not have been able to do when a bus isn't running or a program isn't operating, we're able to invest in those other items. It's not as if after June 30, we can sit on a pile of money and then just use it the next year. It does not work that way. It essentially disappears on June 30th. So we have to put it to work on those needs. So the service replacement goal is $15,000 right now. The central office building, the building that you are in right now, has a roof whose warranty has long expired. It is one of the most critical need. If I could speak on behalf of Jan King and her team, they work on the second floor. It rains on the second floor. Sometimes it rains so much that it rains on the first floor. Mr. Rhodes, when he inherited the HR office, there's some wallpaper that's been coming off for some period of time. We've got some nice water features in this building. It is over 100 years old, and there's a critical need to address the roof replacement, and so that's on the schedule. I know that it is not often exciting to tackle a project that's related to the central office when we have needs across our school system, but this one is long overdue and necessary. Yes, sir.
Out of curiosity, how long ago has the warranty expired? Just out of...
It's my understanding that the roof on this building, the warranty is over 5 years expired on this building. Yes, sir. There is an annual cost for custodial supplies. Those auto scrubbers are what are used to clean our floors. We replace mowers, scrubbers. I talk about 2 million square feet, but we have hundreds of acres of property that we also have to care for as well. When you think about our custodians, I think it's always helpful that our public understands those folks do far more than just take care of the inside of a building. They also have to take care of the outside and those campuses. And so we replace lawnmowers across our school system. We replace auto scrubbers for cleaning. Those get significant use, and so there's an annual replacement schedule for those. East Henderson High School, and I'm going to pair this with the next page just because it's referenced as well for West Henderson High School. Though the sound and lighting systems in both of those auditorium spaces are over 30 years old. They're failing. There's no additional equipment to replace and repair them. We've held public events at both spaces over the last couple of years where those systems have stopped working or are not working properly. Think about them beyond just when you're having an event in there, but those are our public gathering spaces. When we first started pricing those systems about 3 years ago to put them onto the Mr. T schedule, those costs were about $250,000 a piece. Most recently, especially as the economy has turned, we've been repricing these things all the time. The most recent price that we've received for each of those systems is $98,000. And so we prioritize those needs because, as my maintenance folks will tell me right now, from an AV standpoint, if they stopped working today, we don't have the replacement parts. We can't replace the systems. The lighting systems are significantly out of date, and this would upgrade those to like LED systems and upgraded sound systems.
I'll be honest. It gives me a lot of heartburn to spend $200,000 on lighting and sound when we haven't done Upward Elementary or Rugby.
Yes, sir.
I can't go along with spending on lighting and sound, whether they're going to break or not. If you're telling me that the safety of kids is involved with the way that Rugby entrance is set up, the way that Upward needs to be turned around, I can't go along with spending that money on sound and lighting systems.
But when you look at, I mean, I totally agree 100%, but you're looking at 1.2 million for Upward and Rugby.
Sure.
As opposed to $200,000 that may be $500,000.
And you also
down
got
the
to
road.
look at it in the arts aspect too. Some of this technology is so old that it can
No, I
electrocute
agree. All
someone
of it's
for
old,
touching
but
it.
I thought this board was really concerned with safety about
Absolutely.
6 months ago to a year ago, and that was our number one concern. And to me, sound and lighting definitely gets kicked down the road to safety issues.
But if $200,000 would do that,
Yeah.
I would totally agree with you. If the money, it still won't do it. The money that they're holding will do it whenever they decide to release it. I mean,
That's a big if we're playing right there, 'cause
Well,
I'm not
it
sure
is a
we're
big
ever
if.
going to get that money back.
we may not, but again, 200,000 will not do either.
It will
project.
not. It will not do those systems, but
And
It won't do it.
And I appreciate that the commentary and the discussion there. I would emphasize that same point. You know, the information that we've got, both of those projects as it relates to Upward and Rugby, were bid, were contract ready. They were ready to roll.
there you go.
So we are equally ready should the county decide that that money can be released for us because it was in the current budget year as they reforecast kind of how the local economy is affected. To that point, yes, certainly $200,000 will not move either one of those projects individually forward because the base scope of those projects are beyond that cost figure. I would remind the board, at least with these, that these are deferred maintenance projects for lighting and sound that are not aesthetic choices. That is used as a classroom, that's used as a main gathering space for the individual schools specifically themselves. And I think it is it's an important conversation to balance those safety priorities with the deferred maintenance needs. But neither of those projects could be accomplished with that $200,000. Yes, sir.
And also, a related question or comment is when we decide, you said a lot of our facilities are used by outside groups.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the auditoriums and so forth. And I think we need to consider all these total costs that we have to pay when and this is just one of them. I'm not saying we're not charging enough, but we need to consider what we charge in rent for these outside groups when we have, expenses like this.
Yes, sir.
That needs to be figured in with it.
Most certainly. And I appreciate you bringing that part up because Mr. Rhodes, in coordination with Mr. Sosha and our maintenance team, has really done an excellent job kind of upfitting our facility request guidelines. I think for a long time, there were a lot of very informal ways in which our facilities were used, and that was nice. But we do use them a great deal for outside groups, and the investments in these require that people compensate us for at least those base costs. When they use those facilities, especially, outside groups that are using them for a profit. We have different price structures for a for-profit group versus a non-profit group. But the critical nature, at least of why these are being presented to the board for consideration, is we've recognized for a long time these projects have a need, and we've gotten, again, as I said, very ideal pricing associated with those and can give consideration to each of them. The next one that you see up there is the softball field lighting. Please note in the third category there, that's year 2. So you approved that project last year, but you're going to get some more information about this in my construction update on Monday night. But Those lighting systems are installed, the one at East and West Henderson. We're simply waiting for the final hookup from Duke Power. They've had other priorities in the community as of late with some of the storm work that they've been doing. But the systems are fully installed, and as soon as they're hooked up to their individual meters, they'll go. And this is a year 2 of year 6 on the lease work.
Back to North High getting lights.
Wait for the click.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
It's at the bottom.
It's at the bottom of this one, and it's at the next.
Okay.
Yes. the
Have we
final-
signed that contract for those north lights?
Oh, no, sir. This has not been approved. This would not happen until the Board of Education approved this budget.
The softball field was a Title IX issue, right?
At
Title IX?
East and at West, it's a Title IX
Okay.
issue.
But
When
at
I-
north, neither one of them
Oh,
have lights, so
I
it's
know.
not.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes, sir. So then when you look at Flat Rock Middle School gym roof, that is a scheduled warranty replacement. That warranty expired just a couple of years ago. Remember, we have 20-year warranties on that work. This took place during the renovations of those 2 school facilities. What I would draw your attention to on this gym roof particularly is if the Mr. T money, if you will, still existed next year, this was on that second year schedule that Joint Facility put that together. So we kind of slid that one over into our capital, recognized its critical need. This board had much discussion last year or previously in this year about the need for band and musical instrument replacement across our school system, that we have much outdated equipment that we're issuing to our kids. Dr. King, Instructional Services, and that team put a lot of energy into determining what the kind of standard was for the age of that equipment, the condition of that equipment. And we talked about establishing a line item in our capital budget that would help us bring that up to more modern, that we don't have a tuba, let's say from the 70s, but that we're bringing that up to equipment that is more appropriate for our students in the fine arts program. And so we're looking at an allocation that would be a per pupil participation and ADM number for each of our middle schools and our high schools, $90,000 for musical instrument replacement. The next line deals with a maintenance schedule replacement, water heater replacement. A lot of our water heaters, again, are reaching their useful life. And as we're doing that, we're replacing them with InstaWater heaters, those systems that allow us to have hot water all the time. They're much more efficient systems and much more effective systems. We're also trying to target areas where we can install hot water where it currently doesn't exist. In some of our bathrooms that you might hear from in our elementary school teachers, it's only cold water. Right. And so when the buildings were built, that's all they have to wash their hands. As we think about coming back to school and the ways that we can ensure health and safety, we're starting to build a replacement schedule and an installation schedule for hot water heaters. You'll see again.
What schools? Have you already
Sorry?
decided what schools?
We're establishing where those priority are now. We've not listed those out. I'm asking our maintenance department to do that now. That number, of course, does not tackle all of them.
This is for how many? 14,000.
That would approximately get you 14 of them. Yes, ma'am. We might be able to do a little bit better if we buy them in bulk, depending on the size and the manufacturer and how many of them we're buying. But generally, you're talking about 14.
New elementary schools do have
Yes, ma'am.
warm water at least.
They do.
Sure, it's not hot.
Right. There's some limits to how hot it
And
can
that
be.
goes back how far Mills River, Hillendale have warm water?
They do not.
They do not.
Yeah. Work truck replacement schedule. Again, we're talking about several vehicles in the maintenance department. Some of those are full-on vehicles. Of course, we're trying to cycle those out as it relates to our maintenance contracts. One note that I would give you about vehicle replacement, because again, we're replacing and owning those vehicles, is we've been working really closely about the possibility of fleet vehicle contracts and otherwise. We currently don't have fleet vehicle contracts for the extension of our programs, but as we expand this and we look at the investment that we're making in owning a vehicle, we're trying to make sure that we're being the best stewards of those dollars. So I credit Mr. Socia for the homework that he's doing there. Should we be able to approach that, these would be dollars that we would come back, giving consideration to reinvestment about fleet vehicle contracts. Per Mrs. Case's question, note the bottom 2 lines here. So part of the capital outlay that we developed for this upcoming school year before the school closures and the COVID-19 period was you made an investment this past year in addressing a Title IX inequity at East Henderson and West Henderson. That would leave from a school system-owned facility, North Henderson High School, both baseball and softball without lighting systems at all. And so we had built that second year budget to say that we would complete that initiative as it relates to that. You notice that what we've done again is we've identified lease costs associated with these. We did not put in full purchase costs because, as you all know, the full purchase cost for a softball field is about $150,000. $70,000. And then we're estimating that full purchase cost for baseball field to be about $50,000 a year. You multiply that times 6, it's about $300,000. The lighting system, of course, for a baseball field is more expansive than it is for a softball field. But the goal would be that we would bring all of those fields to an equitable playing field, if you will, that we'd not have a situation where any of our school facilities were disparate. And so that would be the goal with that particular cost
Does
structure.
Hendersonville play softball?
Jackson Park.
Jackson Park?
Oh, okay.
Is it lit?
No.
No,
Where does they play baseball?
The Den, Green Meadows.
Is it lit?
No.
it's not.
So, I don't know, see how this is
Jackson
an
Park is lit,
equitable.
isn't it?
So those are facilities that we don't own. So
Oh,
we're not able to invest in those particular facilities. If we own them, then you would see Hendersonville High School in the same category.
Once again, like the other lighting, I think, East and West are on a different boat, because we do have Title IX issues there with the baseball fields being lit at both of those schools and the softball fields not being lit. I get it, and we're already in that lease, and we've already contracted that out. But looking at $450,000 for lights at North over the next 6 years during this current environment, I think is a mistake. I do not. I listen. I love baseball. I love softball, but we played baseball a long time without lights. And I think that $75,000 and going forward $450,000, because once you sign it, you got to keep going, is a real mistake to put that in this budget right now. Huge
And
mistake.
so it's not a Title IX issue?
Absolutely not. Not if both of them
With
don't
North.
have it. If the baseball field doesn't have it and the softball field doesn't have it, so there's no inequity there.
Right.
Inequity-
The Title IX element is based on the facility itself. So by site, not by school system.
Okay.
I would really, really, that issue alone could cause me to vote no on this budget. I just don't think it's the right time. Was it the right time 3 months ago? Sure, but it's not 3 months ago. And I think we need to be really careful in contracts that we get involved with that are going to tie us down for years on end when we're not even playing baseball.
I hate to say that, but I hate to agree with you, but I do.
Well, I don't know if I say thank you or not on
But,
that.
and I hate it.
If we
because
could
I
note
love-
in the record that Ms. Korn and Mr. Craven agreed on an issue, that would be good.
I don't want them to be different, but they're all different in some way. I hate it. 3 months ago, I agree
Right.
with you. I'm sorry. I know
Well-
Dot is her home and her heart is at North, and I was there too, and I love it. But I just right now to hook ourselves into 6 years, I would have to agree with Blair.
Right. Well, and when you look at the fact that we have safety issues at other schools, I mean, I have issues. I have
If
issues
this
with all of
pans out
it.
and we get all this money and we're able to put it in different piles, it may be different next year, but
Another thing that 3 months ago, I felt stronger than I do now about, but I hope future boards won't forget about it. We
Well,
need
yeah.
to air condition the three gyms
Yeah.
that won't have air conditioning when Hendersonville High School
Right.
comes on board with air conditioning.
Yes, sir. And I think, that's one of those places to the board's kind of dialogue here is, this is an attempt as an initial presentation that reflects the board's priorities. When we were first talking about this, the board said, if we don't do North this year, we need to do North next year. It needs to be part of that work. So that's reflected here. Similarly, the 2-year out Mr. T money involved those gyms and recognizing that as those projects come online and we have Hendersonville High School with air-conditioned spaces, that you'd have 3 other schools that would not have those spaces. And so that will be, of course, part of the conversation is reflecting what are the priorities. And those priorities, I'll kind of quote Mr. Wyatt, when you establish kind of a plan, that's what it is. But it's a lot like driving a car. Like you can put your foot on the gas, you can put your foot on the brake, you can turn left, you can turn right. And the board ultimately makes those decisions based on whatever the priorities are, at the particular time. So when you look at this one, this inclusion was recognizing that the board asked us to not forget
Sure.
that
No.
if we didn't
Oh,
include it
I
in the
Listen,
previous.
no.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to chastise you
Sure.
for putting this in here. What I'm saying, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, and then plans change.
Sure.
And we've been punched in the face. And our budgets for the foreseeable future are going to look vastly different than they look right now. And I think we need to be more cognizant of that and make sure that we're not tying ourselves to things. You know, if the lights cost $50,000 and it was this year and it was done, okay. We're talking $450,000 over the next couple of years, which we've already got tied up in East and West. Well, that'll be 300,000.
How long off are you talking about North getting it then? If you're concerned about
until things turn
450,000?
around.
What?
Until things turn around.
We know for sure we get this money that's on hold. Even that 1 year, if we get this money that's on hold, I'm kind of like Blair. I mean,
Right.
maybe we'll, maybe we won't. But we're like in the calendar or like vacation. We just flat don't know.
We don't. And you have to be.
If we weren't tying our, if like you say, I hate to agree. If we,
No, you like it.
if you, just
She's
50 and
made that
25
quite
this year.
apparent.
So let's, I mean, you know.
With that in mind, would the board then be open to, as you're thinking about that, establishing a capital placeholder project that could be done in the spring of
Yes.
2021? That if, let's say, the Mr. T money were approved and
Yeah.
reallocated to the school system, this might then return as a priority that would not be expended, that would not be contracted until late next 2021, that you would be able to make some decisions on. So we would establish a different placeholder project. So for example, like at that $75,000, one of the items that we removed from the Mr. T was some HVAC iWorks replacement at one of our schools, that continuing project. It could step in there. It could be scheduled for the spring. In January, the Board of Commissioners said, you've got your $4.6 million back, and the board wants to engage in this conversation again, those dollars would not be expended or contracted into that point?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is Bo was telling us we'll know September, January for sure. And then we can say, okay, we're getting that money. We're good.
Right. Because I asked that question because much of this, you guys are probably well aware from a maintenance standpoint, is the minute that July 1st gets here, we start, boom, we start spend. This money oftentimes is spent before Christmas. And so it would be important.
I don't want you signing any leases at July 1.
Of course, right. And again, what I would be noting is that for the presentation that you might receive on Monday, is there would be a different project listed here. Because that would be the project that ultimately would be approved, pending what happened in January, where you could reconsider the allocation of those dollars.
So my opinion, I just figured to just put it out there. One is it's technically not official until we sign the lease anyway, correct? Like even if it was right there on that budget,
correct,
it wouldn't happen until the board agreed to do a lease. So hypothetically, because the other part of the budget has a unknown expenditure, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen when we start school. Hypothetically, what if we just take off that, right? Still kind of have it there, but have it as an unknown capital thing. And so if we have to spend it on something else for COVID-19 stuff, but maybe we come back in December and everything's hunky-dory, and then we can pop another project or pop these into the place.
You're not going to spend a capital project on COVID-19.
Well, you don't know what if they make us install plexiglass down the hallway? I mean, I'm just saying what other school districts have done.
I
across
don't.
the nation. I mean,
I don't think you're looking at it as a capital project. I think that's something, if they make you put plexiglass somewhere, they're going to have to come up with them funds.
Mr. Sosha, for the capital budget that we send to the county commissioners and ultimately for their approval when we send this to them, does each capital project have to be named and accounted for?
It doesn't have to be. We have done that in the past. That's not necessarily a requirement.
But if we put the 400,000 from the extra million in
COVID.
capital and say it is, for emergencies or undetermined or whatever Mr. Caldwell wants to have it say, I suppose you could put 75,000 but if you have another need for this year, you would have put it in this, I'm assuming. So maybe we could add 75,000 to that 400,000 if that's where we're going to put it. I don't know.
I mean, think about this. You've got 400 grand that's sitting there that we've got set aside for COVID. Whatever. 100 grand for your lighting for north or what, west and east. That's 200 grand. 75 grand that you're sitting right there for the lease of your softball fields, for the lights. You're 25 grand away from doing upward.
Well, and I'm also my continued opinion is on the next page, which we haven't even got to, activity bus. We haven't really used our activity buses this year, but there's a replacement on our list. Can we hold that off for another cycle?
I think a lot of these things, in this particular line item were maintenance. And we're kind of scrunching maintenance in with
Projects.
I hate the Mr. T acronym, but the Mr. T stuff, and I want to make sure that our buildings are waterproof. I want to make sure that systems that are failing are getting replaced. So heating and cooling, make sure that water heaters are taken care of. I think we always have to take care of our trucks and you always got to keep those things up and all of that jazz. But when you start adding new stuff to it, I think new stuff now's not the time, period. I do believe we need to replace our musical instruments. But to me, if we have an overarching safety need, such as rugby and flat rock, those have to be our first priorities. And we've got to do everything that we can to get those done. And then whatever falls in place after that, then you take care of. My opinion.
Brian, is there a second sheet to this?
There is.
Go ahead, and if you don't mind, let's go through the whole project, and then we can come up with some possible solutions that we could bring you Monday night for you to discuss on the what we could do, and kind of have Plan A and Plan B. I know that someone asked about what is the when will we know about the Mr. T money, and right now I've created a T-shirt that I wear that says "I don't know" on the front. If you like 3 words, or I can give it to you in 4 words, I do not know. So it depends, Ms. Case. I can make the sentence longer or shorter. But I think that would be looked at in January. Now you got to remember that when the budget is passed, there's $13 million of state construction money out there as well that we're going to get. That if all of a sudden rugby's not there, then we could take that. And it's moving red solo cups.
I'll be honest, but I think you're playing right now. That budget is gone. That budget that they were supposed to do a year ago or whenever it was, that thing has flown the coop and is not coming back.
And I've not heard about the capital dollars.
That thing is gone. It is out the window, and we're in a new normal now. And I think we have to think differently than we have before. We can't just keep adding on and adding on. I think we need to build nice reserves and make sure that we can take care of things that have to be taken care of. I think you're going to see a real crunch here in the next couple of years as far as our budget goes.
Okay. Let us go through, if you don't mind, Dr. Bryant, and then we'll come back and then we'll
Yes, sir.
talk about some possible scenarios and solutions that we
Sure.
can.
So the top item that you see there is the Rugby Middle School. This is a gym roof. Again, think about it just like we talked about the Flat Rock roof. When those renovations occurred about the same time, it's a couple of years past its warranty date. Approximately the same cost for us to be able to do that work. And a necessary step, this was one more of those items that was moved from the MRTS money over to the left, if you will, to our capital outlay now that money is on hold. One of the priorities for our safety initiatives and enhancements, Ms. Holt, you were asking about the things that were specifically related to that. You see those safety and security items right here. Is a security camera installation, the first phase of a fully integrated system that we currently do not have. All those kind of systems operate independently right now by school specifically. And oftentimes those expenses have been school level expenses. If they wanted more cameras, they raised the money and bought them themselves. As we brought on a safety director to coordinate that work, Mr. Massington has been working really critically to look at vendors who can provide us the highest technology available and a service that we currently don't have, so that system can be fully integrated across our work. If you remember 2 years ago when we talked about what that might cost across our entire school system, that dollar figure is about $1 million for us to do the entire school system at the kind of designated security camera level. So this would be phase one of that. We would essentially be building all the backbone and the infrastructure so that we could start building upon that with that 175. Another priority of Mr. Massington and our school safety efforts is continuing our reunification and evacuation planning. That involves some basic capital costs when we come down to equipment that's necessary to be able to coordinate and manage one of those things. So we have designated dollars for that work. And then the third item there that you see are some annual subscriptions, and those are specifically related to software costs for our access control systems, which we're currently using. When you think about our cards that sort of run us through the system, that's an ongoing software cost associated with that, as well as the camera system software that we have to be able to tackle. Mr. Caldwell talked about Project Empower, and if you remember again, over in the MRTS money, there was a $300,000 line for Project Empower. That is critical for the sustainability of our Chromebook initiative.
Agreed.
Those are not one-time expenses. Mr. Fender, I know he's listening right now, and so I'm gonna make sure I have his back. 300,000 of that is in that 1.7 that's frozen. We had intended to roll it over. We don't have access to that. We have to make sure that there's a $300,000 line item available to our Project Empower initiative and its sustainability. Hopefully that rollover money will come available to us as well, but that's why you see that line item. Those were not one-time expenses. You should expect to see as a board a number like that or greater year after year after year after year, because every year we are rolling devices out and we're putting new ones in. You don't just spend that money one time. And so those are critical needs.
So these are going, this 300,000, they'll work on the new ones we buy?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. So this would be money that we would be replacing new ones with. So Chromebooks tend to be supported for a period of time. And then Google tells you, you know what, we don't support the operating system for that anymore. And now you need to know that if you keep using that, it's not being supported from a software standpoint. So you have to then buy a new one that will last you 4 or 5 years and go on. And so those monies have to be available for that.
Do we know a rough number of how many that is, just out of curiosity?
I'm betting that Mr. Sosha could do that math in his head.
I don't have the number of Chromebooks, but I do know that Mr. Fender is looking at needing about like $1.4 million spend in Chromebooks next year, about this time next year, because of exactly what Dr. Bryant was just talking about. The support, those systems are about to be dead in the water, and he's going to have to replace them with ones that will continue. So that's what his plan is for next spring.
We'll get you that number, Mr. Absher, in terms of what that talks about. Vehicle replacement, again, technology. We've been working hard to upgrade, vehicles. So you're looking at about $15,000 a piece. Our technicians are doing that particular work as they're out and about. There was a period of time, and Mr. McMurray can probably attest to this, that we had a couple of technology vehicles that didn't have air conditioning that we were hoping would make it between the different schools because they were kind of on the bottom of that totem pole. We've been working to upfit those, and so you'll see the vehicle replacement schedule associated with that. Yes,
Would
sir?
it be cheaper to pay mileage for their personal vehicles than paying for an actual technology vehicle?
I'm going to once again look to my left and say, Mr. Sosha.
So that's what we've been looking into, is the comparison of mileage for individuals to drive versus having a fleet vehicle and not paying miles. And it's depending on what vehicle we're looking at. There are some instances where I would say, no, it's cheaper to actually us have a vehicle and not be paying 50 cents a mile to everybody.
It depends on how long that vehicle lasts.
Correct.
I mean, a $15,000 vehicle, how long does that last them?
Right. Well, I would have it be on a 8 to 10 year
Yeah.
replacement.
They last a
8 to
long
10 year.
time because you got to remember they're not traveling to Raleigh, they're traveling within Henderson County. And so the mileage, it takes a while to get the mileage up there. Most of the time, the age of the vehicle is outweighs the mileage. And it's almost the beauty of this, though, I like the work truck aspect for maintenance and technology. Just due to the fact that we've got it, we've locked them up, it's our tools in there, we have signage on those trucks, and I'm just not sure we want maintenance to start having their own pickup trucks and other things. Now, of course, We're also talking about social workers and some other types of, this can really get into a deep fleet car type situation on mileage versus transportation. I know Ms. Holt can probably speak to the HVAC. Do they have fleet trucks or do they use their own?
They have our trucks.
They have our trucks, and I don't know. It's because it's our trucks with our tools with our signage on it, and to be honest with you, sometimes that signage kind of helps me if I've got somebody parked at McDonald's at 10 o'clock from 10 to 11:30. We get calls on it, so it's a plus where if somebody's driving their own vehicle, it's an easier identification. But I think we can certainly run some numbers. But we started looking at it. So.
Yeah. We'll continue to evaluate
So,
and update that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm stuck on a hiccup. Mr. Fender needs $1.4 million in 2021. Where are we getting that money?
So there are a variety of funding sources that would be associated with that. Part of it is, of course, on the hope and expectation that the $300,000 that was rolling over would be there. There's $300,000 that's in capital. There's a $300,000 of the Project Empower money that's in our local current expense fund. So you're at 9 right now.
Okay.
And then there are monies that he receives from the state that are, and I don't know the code for that, but there's state money that comes to that helps to make that whole. So you're sort of piecing together a lot of different parts associated with that. If you remember, Project Empower used to be a $600,000 line item.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And part of that line item stayed in capital because it's a capital expense.
Yes.
And we moved part of it into our local current
Forgot about
because there's
that.
operational. So it's sort
Right.
of, there's 600,000 plus 300,000 that's on hold plus money that's coming from the state. So it's kind of like you're having to put all those pots together.
He's getting some allotment from the state as well.
Mhm.
How much are each unit?
$250, $300. I'm not sure. 300 is what Mr. McMurray is saying.
And all of that 1.4 goes to actual hardware?
I think we would need Mr. Fender to answer that question.
No, I'm
I
just
don't
saying
think so.
no
I think
right
some
quick.
of it's
was-
personnel.
Some of it,
And-
I think some of it is it's wiring.
So the 300,000 goes to hardware. Well, that's part of the hardware.
Yeah, but that's not a big.
It's
part.
hardware. It's
It's
devices.
all hardware, right?
It's hardware. It's hotspots. Well, not hotspots. It's the thing in the
Wi-Fi.
routers, the things in the ceiling to continue the Wi-Fi. They go bad all the time, just like your home, and things go out. So you've got that. You've got, like I say,
So
wiring.
300 grand should only pay for 1,200.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I know because I have kids that are on devices right now, so I know it's important, but I was just like, okay, wait, how are we getting them this money? And I did read, I think federal is supposed to be
The
sending us
CARE
some
Act
money.
has technology in there,
Yeah,
but they
which
don't
would
tell us how much we're going to
Be
get.
awesome,
Or what we can use it for.
Yeah, and that goes to that point of what the restrictions are. Obviously, we want to be able to utilize as much of those resources, in the most strategic way possible. Like, what are the priorities? How have things changed? What is it that we're targeting moving forward? And I think as we've learned through this remote period, the school closure period, and otherwise, is the infrastructure of our technology department is critical. Like, we cannot overinvest in that component of it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why you see that in the local current that was presented by Mr. Caldwell when you talk about technician. We cannot overinvest in that category.
Have we got money to replace those Chromebooks that's going to be destroyed when we get them back from the kids?
That's a fabulous question, Ms. Case. I think, we expect that some of that will happen. And then we'll have to deal with that. But what we know, and I think I'm fair in speaking on behalf of Mr. Fender here, is we don't know what that impact will be right now.
Mhm.
We're going to learn a lot when we start taking those back up. How many of them have been very well taken care of them? How many, all of us that have been teachers know when you used to take those textbooks back and used to assess, like, what were your textbook damages? Well, you've been holding a $300 computer. We'll see. And I know that'll be something that we'll share with you guys about where we stand there. Okay.
So a question about vehicles, sorry.
Sure.
Before we switch to that next one. So I know you said you were looking at possible fleet management
Right.
system. So in the long run, if you do a contract like that, that sometimes will help cut the costs down of having to purchase something.
It could, absolutely. You may be reallocating those dollars. Like if we are able to determine, let's say, for example, that a fleet is the best stewardship of how we move forward, we might be talking about those dollars being able to be utilized
So
in that
like
way.
maybe 30,000 could switch to like 6 vehicles under a contract versus just 1 vehicle. I
That's
suppose.
right. Yes, sir.
So maybe I'm wondering if it might be a benefit before we purchase that vehicle and the other vehicle to kind of look to see what that fleet management would be like. Does that make sense?
No, I think it is important for us to start having that conversation, for us to start looking at that. I think within this budget, the one thing that you have to keep in mind about fleet vehicles is it's a recurring cost at
Right.
that point, right? So it's not 30 grand one time, it's 30 grand every year for those 5 or 6 vehicles plus everything else that goes into it. I would like to see if we are going to start putting social workers in cars, superintendents, social superintendents in cars, that we're going to put, whoever in cars. I think it's imperative that we get some cost analysis on if we're buying 10-year-old cars with 120,000 miles on them, they're going to last this long versus are we going to start leasing some cars and start seeing what that difference looks like.
We will be glad to
That work?
talk. Yes, sir. Absolutely. We'll talk more about that.
Back
The-
to your hot spots. I'm not a computer genius. So are we paying money now for these hot spots, or what goes with that?
For the ones that we have right now, yes, ma'am.
Are we going to keep them during the next school year and pay for them because we're going to have those 5 remote learning days?
Well, we got some donations.
We got some
for hot
donations,
spots,
correct.
too,
Okay.
And the
Dog-
Facebook thing too, right?
Dogwood Trust has provided some hotspots for us to use, and we
Is that going to
use.
continue?
So
Dogwood was a one-time. It was a one-time grant. I think there's two items with a hotspot. It's the amount that the hotspot costs just to buy the hotspot,
Mhm.
and then it's a monthly contract, just like your cell phone, the data to keep paying for it.
And we
Um,
own some of them, and some
right.
of them have been provided to us through this process.
And some of these health foundations have committed in general saying, they're looking at the COVID as a continuing thing, and they'll revisit this later too to sell us more additional funding.
I think what you're,
I don't think
what
that's going to happen.
What
now.
this board can expect
Like
is
if-
one of the
if
requirements of the
it's
statute and the
not a
legislation is that we develop a
They're not
remote
gonna be able
learning
to do it.
plan that the board approves and that we present to DPI. So you'll see a lot of that kind of information. What's that going to look like? Can we answer those questions now? No. But when we are required to have remote learning days in our calendar, we're required to approve a remote learning plan moving forward. You'll sort of see the level of detail on that.
how many hotspots do we have out right now?
I don't know that number. I'm not sure the number we have out right now.
I know that we really pushed it to take care of all of our seniors, especially the ones.
Seniors and some of our teachers.
Seniors
that
and some of
didn't
our teachers were first. And I know that we were running around because the AP test was given online, and we had some children who did not have access that were supposed to schedule for AP. So I know that we were taking care of those. I know that Dr. King was working with that with Mr. Fender. So I'll see if she has some
It really
ideas.
wasn't more than like 100 of them or something.
See
Was
what
it?
kind of where.
That wasn't a lot.
It wasn't a lot.
Right.
No, we were able to take care of all the students that needed them for the APs and otherwise, but we also, as Mr. Caldwell was saying, we received some that were part of the Dogwood Trust, and we were waiting on those to be received and then to be activated and then for us to be able to put them to work. So we'll get you those numbers, but I'm not sure off the top of my head. We don't want to give you a bad number of how many are out there right now issued. Real quickly, the couple of other items that are listed here, activity bus replacement, that third from the bottom. We had to take 2 activity buses out of our fleet this year because they were not safe to continue traveling the extensive distances. If you've been on the board for a little while, you would say, well, I haven't seen activity bus on this schedule. Exactly. We've not been replacing our activity buses. Fred has asked me every year to get that on there. And I've said, Fred, there's something else that has been more significant. A bus is about $100,000. It is no small expense, and the state will not pay for that. Bernie can nod his head with me right here. If we want to add an activity bus to our fleet, we have to buy it. We have to own that bus.
Do these buses have Wi-Fi?
They don't, but all of them can be equipped with Wi-Fi. One of the things that we're looking at, and there are a lot of other, like Synovia, who we're working with, they are making them Wi-Fi accessible in that way. And so not all of our activity buses do. We can certainly look at one that would be equipped that way. Yeah.
I think we've got, I was looking at, man, I think we've got some right
Well, I
now.
thought we had a couple.
We do.
that
We
had
have a
it.
couple right now.
And
We
then
do. We do. But they-
Will you find out what that cost is to add Wi-Fi to the buses, to that bus?
Sure,
That
absolutely.
bus?
And Dr. King's telling us we've got about 25 hotspots that are handed out right now as part of.
That's it?
Yeah, 25 out and 70 of them coming from Dogwood.
And
they're like 2-3 weeks out of shipping, so it's like take forever to get here.
Well, it's not even going to matter at this point.
No.
Right.
And I talked to all the teachers of the year over the last, there was 24 of them over the last few days. And that was part of my questions I asked them was, hey, can you tell me how many of your kids do not have access? And I would say probably every teacher said I have 2 students that have no access. That was like the common number.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you
10%
think
of
that's
our kids.
48 kids just in 24 teachers times how many teachers do we, I mean, it's a lot.
And you got to remember, sometimes hotspots won't help either. We just can't turn around
Yeah.
because where there's no cell phone service, there's no there's no hotspot.
You go to Green River, it doesn't matter that you have a
Because
hotspot.
you've also got to know that when we're just not going to go and buy a hotspot because we run it through our system to make sure that there is what children can look up on that hotspot is just not free for all internet.
It's a bigger conversation than just hotspots. It's like you guys were just talking about here. North Mills River has no service whatsoever. I live right off of 64 where it completely goes dead. If you ever had a call and you're going past White Pine and your phone dies, that's where I live. It's a broader conversation about broadband and cell phone access. And so it's like you said, it's not just about here's a hotspot,
Right.
you've got access.
And it is taken, there are a lot on back order right now because the hotspots are there, but for us to get them filtered and making sure, because once we give a kid a hotspot, we're responsible for what that child looks up on the internet as best we can. So therefore, that's why when a child is at North Henderson High School, there's only certain things that child will do and the internet will stop it. Well, we do the same thing with a hotspot.
That's
So
awesome.
so
I
it's-
didn't know you could do that.
yeah, so it's just not, here's a hotspot. And so it's the hotspots there, but yet it's this getting the filtering process, which right now has been the huge delay, is because that's what every school system is wanting, is for them to filter these things.
John, do you know how many packages we've mailed out to kids that didn't have internet?
Oh,
The
yeah, I'm
extraordinary
curious
Dr.
about
King
that.
could answer that question for you. I know she will text me in just a moment. So if I just say a bunch of stuff and delay, I'll get a
Yeah, and you can act
notification.
like you knew
Exactly.
it.
And we'll go over, she's going to do a learn from home on Monday. I
Monday.
think what I would like to do right now, if you don't mind, is go back to the first page, Dr. Bryan. If you
Can I just touch on the
Oh, I'm
final
sorry.
two?
Did you
Yes,
not
sir.
get through?
The
Okay, I'm
final
sorry.
two, again, just draw your attention. The West, as I mentioned to you on the first slide, East Henderson, West Henderson, that's the auditorium system replacement. And then finally, year 2 of the softball field lighting, which is moving forward from there. Okay.
And being sitting in Dr. Bryan's chair when you do capital, this is always one of those that this project, I'm not sure about this project. And so this is the way that I think that we would like to handle this, if you don't mind. I will have to say this, though, Ms. Corn, you're getting old when you remember back in your days that you were in charge of facilities and you did the roof replacement and now it's out of warranty and you're having to replace it again.
I think that says we are out of warranty.
That says that I'm getting close to being out of warranty because I remember I remember standing on top of, in fact, I stood on top of this building and got its roof replaced and on top of the gym roof at West High and on top of the gym roof at Rugby. Exactly. So if you don't mind, just take the first page. And what we would like to do is bring you a couple of options. If you have heartburn about some projects that we could certainly remove and put them on a waiting period till we know more about Mr. T money, and bring it in with something else. Because look, the list is not, this is, Ms. Cornell, I'm still waiting for her. Was this the only thing that's on the list? No, ma'am.
No,
I
ma'am.
mean, it's not the only thing on maintenance list. We've got a priority list that if something comes off, there's a roof that's either out of warranty or close to warranty that we could put right back on there. Or as you're saying, Mr. Craven, you would like to see, could we come up with $70,000 or $700,000 out of this? This is kind of what we would like
You have to itemize it.
We've always in the past taken it up to the county commissioners so they can kind of see. Now, this could be the year that right now with the COVID-19 and we're still not sure of what's out there. We could just say of capital needs and put it in general terms.
Well, what I mean, it seems to me that we could maybe show them this is what we're thinking now, but given the situation, we are giving this to you as an itinerant list, as a draft list, not the amount of money.
Sure.
As a draft list, because, I'm not saying let's take anything off the list so much as I'm saying that we don't have to decide today. We don't know. Your shirt is right. We don't know. I'm not as pessimistic as Blair and think it's all going to be awful in our next few budget years. I hope that he's wrong.
Me too.
I know he hopes he's wrong. But if Steve White is telling you January they'll know more, I mean, I'm not saying wait. I know you guys have to get on with some things, but it is an itinerant list. It
Sure.
seems to me a draft, and it seems like the commissioners ought to take that.
Yes, ma'am. And
Makes a big difference if they're going to not release 4.6 or
Absolutely.
3.9 or 0 of that money.
Well, they've already 1.7's been reallocated. The 4.6 is not going to be there. We're already told for
A
this
lot of
year.
money.
I mean, that's a chunk of change, and I really believe we need to tighten our pants a little bit and just think about actual maintenance.
I mean,
Maintenance.
even too is just like giving them and say we want to spend 1.5 on capital. We're not for sure 100% on that current list because we want to see what's going on, and then decide later what to spend it on.
Well, this I know you guys want a definitive list, so you don't have to come back to us every week and say, can we start off this project? And that's not what I'm saying, but the commissioners have been pretty good about it, even our current expense, that they don't want to know a big long list. This is your money, spend it the way I've heard them say this.
Yes,
this
ma'am.
is what we're allocating. You spend it the way that you feel necessary. I don't mind showing them the list, but this is not an absolute because there's a lot we don't know.
And from our perspective, I would want you all as a board to know if with something like that in mind, certainly if there are items that you say, you know what, these are ones that we want to tentatively wait on, like those don't need to be July 1 projects. Those don't need to be, approved, for example, to go to contract, first thing, that's fine. If you want alternatives to say, you know what, we want to consider something else that's specific to maintenance or otherwise, that you would be able to include those, as options. We have flexibility in that because we are executing these projects throughout the year. Some of them require immediate work and organization, for example, to make sure that equipment is in place and vehicles are in place at the start of a school year. But you look at the lease contracts related to East Henderson and West Henderson, that all that work is done. All that is we're just writing a check. That doesn't require any effort on our part right now. And so certainly we're going to follow the direction that the board gives us about moving forward with any of these projects so that we have a clear picture of what your expectations are. And I think Ms. Korn's guidance is strong in the sense that we have heard from the Board of Commissioners frequently that they're like, here's your money.
It's your money.
It's your money.
whatever.
You do it what you want to. The 1.5 is the magic number, right? The number that you saw on page 2 down at the bottom. What I can tell you, and I think what Mr. Caldwell would echo, like that's the number. We don't have any more than that right now. And so whatever we put in there and whatever you approve has to be within that amount.
And I would want you to hear, at least from me, that replacing roofs, do it.
We have to.
I will never forget maintenance coming out and putting a bucket above where the secretary sat at the Rugby office up there, whatever these things that cross are, and then they've got the Silatex. It sat that bucket up there to catch the leak. Nobody thought about that bucket again until it came crashing through the ceiling onto that desk. So replacing roofs and things like that, get it done.
Yes, ma'am.
Don't put those things off when they're there. But they're water heaters. We've got to have warm water for these kids. Those things are non-negotiable. But you could put off musical instruments. I hate to even say that because I know what kind of shape those things are. You could put off that lighting systems, as Blair suggests. I'm not for taking them off, but we got to know what's going to happen in January. So you
Could
guys
we-
come
what-
up with some alternatives.
What I'm hearing is, could we present to you what we would like to start with and put it in priority order? And then that way kind of show you this would be, i.e. first semester, and then this would be second semester. And we know that if we're going to get the Mr. T money unfrozen,
Then we can go
then we
forward
could
with
go
it.
for it. And
I-
if not, then we could change it and just do maintenance and repair and hold on to the lighting and some of those things.
Well, and it's like you're the 400,000 that is in the extra million. I think put it over here in capital undesignated to some extent, because we all know an HVAC system can go out and it has got to be replaced right now. We're not going to all of a sudden decide to add another assistant principal somewhere, for example,
Right.
other than the one you have.
The only
We can always change that. We have that power.
we do, and if you put the 400 in capital,
It's not recurring then.
it's not, well, there's no guarantee. Depends on what
It's
the budget.
recurring anyways, right?
It could be, it couldn't be. I mean, you're right, sir. So, but I think the issue is the only foreseen personnel issues could be in special ed, just due to the fact that I can't tell you when we get back about
With
the number of
TAs as well,
IEPs and see where we are as far as how where are we in the special ed issue totally during this
You could come back to
9 to
us and we could say, okay, this is the situation.
We're gonna have to
Use that
hire-
money.
we're going to have to hire a special ed teacher for records because we are behind on the 9 weeks of IEPs. Mr. Social would just ask for a budget audit to move X amount of dollars from capital to current to pay for a salary. That's right now about the only other personnel that I foresee that we would need, because the rest of it is you're right. We're holding 4.6 because I understand. I do. It's this is not normal times. And so, yeah, I think that's why I made the suggestion of moving the 400 into capital. And do you feel good about us prioritizing? And this is what we're going to start with. And then this is what we'll see what we can do in January.
I mean, I'm okay with all of that. The baseball lighting field at North and softball, I think should be taken off. You don't need to start something. We're committing ourselves in this board to something for 6 years that I don't think we should commit ourselves to right now.
Okay.
If that wasn't a lease, I mean, like I say, if it was 50 and 25, I would say spend it.
Sure.
But
Right.
to sign a lease in
6
the coming
years.
year, I would object.
Well, like I said, that could be easily replaced. We've got access, continued more access lock
Easily
controls
replaced.
easily, Ms. Corn. My maintenance hat is already coming back on from years past.
I would
We have
like to
endless
hold.
spreadsheets to.
Endless
that can,
spreadsheets.
I would like to hold the 100,000 for each
Yeah.
of the replacing the
Auditoriums.
sound and lighting systems. And I'm gonna tell you right now, if we don't get the 4.6, that's coming off for me.
Well, I have to disagree with.
She had to at some point today.
I mean,
It would have been a normal day.
It's okay to hold it, but I
We
don't
can-
see
if we-
taking it off if we can't do anything.
My
with
thing
it.
is this,
Right,
is like,
right,
if
just hold on to
January,
it.
if we come around January and we're like, okay, where are we at with the budget? Are you gonna give us our Mr. T money? The answer is, okay, Mr. Pessimistic, no, because you're not asking for it right now. It means you're not gonna get it. And they're not gonna be like, oh, here's an extra 4.6, here you go. It's not gonna happen. So in January, when we get to sit down and whatever board's here at that particular time, you got, oh, here you go, $100,000 to replace sound and lighting systems in the auditorium. Is it going to be a better time then than now to make that decision? To me, the answer is no. We've got bigger needs.
Well, rugby and upward
Are
Too,
huge.
are huge, and they're too big for that to make any difference.
Not if you keep adding up, but if you keep spending it, you're right.
Well, you
If you
can't.
keep spending your $5, then you're right. You're not going to save 100. You're absolutely right.
I mean,
Yeah, but the problem is the game that we play, and it is kind of a game. It's like the funds that are, if you don't spend them by June 30th, they're gone. Not this, but that's the game that.
Sure, but not this
education
money, not the budget that we're
Not
actually.
this money, but if we don't keep it there as it's something that we need to do,
Sure.
the county commissioners are going to say, well, you've got 200, so now we'll only give you 4.4.
well,
And we don't want it to, that's part of the game you
So
play.
to me, local is completely different than what you're getting from your state and your federal dollars. And in local, from everything that I've heard since I've been on this board, we allocate you these dollars, you do with it as you wish. Blue Ridge came back last year and they wanted to do something else, build a building or whatever they wanted to do, and they switched some projects around. They're like, I don't care, do what you want to do. It's your money. We switched around a couple of things, and I can't remember what they are right now. And Steve Wyatt's like, it's your money. We've allocated it to you. And I agree that we need to have a placeholder of something in here, maintenance, system replacement. I don't care what you call it, but I think when you get really narrow in what you're using that money for, and when you have a potentially 4 new board members coming on in 4 months, we have to prioritize right now what we want to spend money on. And to me, my priority is replacing the roofs, making sure we have hot water, making sure those service vehicles are fixed, and safety needs of our kids, period. And if we are just saying, oh, well, that $100,000 isn't going to put anything in that $700,000, we'll spend it on something. Hell, that's the problem with government as it is. You just spend too much money just willy-nilly for no reason. If we can bank it, if we can add it with that other 400 grand, that's not going to be, that actually is recurrent funds if we had that million in there, that 400,000, 75 grand for your baseball field, your softball field, 100 grand for your lighting, 100 grand for your lighting, you got $675,000. You're 25 grand away from getting Upward Road done, Upward Elementary done, period.
This is 700 just for Upward?
It is
Yeah,
702.
You've got a project done.
Or you pay, what was Rugby's?
500,000.
Oh, then, or you could just do Rugby.
Bam, knock it out. 200 grand, that's 275,000. I've saved you right there. Pull 225, Rugby's done.
I mean,
Either one.
How much are we sitting in
But
reserves?
the problem is, if we do that, then for sure, they're not going to give us the money to do it.
They're not going to anyway.
Well, I know that's what you think.
I mean, listen, we're asking for a budget here, and we are asking them for a budget that's $4.6 million lighter than last year. And last year they also took 1.7 away from that 4.6. If anybody here thinks that they're going to get that 4.6, we're in a completely different stratosphere. It's not going to happen.
So what I'm hearing is we need to, number one, prioritize this on basically what we'd like to spend it on as of July 1st. And go down and certainly say the projects at the bottom. I'm also hearing to bring back another proposal to see if we could do either Rugby or Upward by
If we could
swapping.
do the lower amount, the 500,000 is
Right.
easier than 700. Then
We'll bring you
let's do it.
that option, and we'll bring you a couple of options for you to look at, and you may blend the 2 options to come up with a capital list on what you feel like is on Monday.
In my own opinion, I think we can hold off the sound and lighting if we needed to. I mean, the only thing it affects is the drama program, which hasn't got anything over the years, like nothing. It's just like musical instruments.
Michael, it's just like a lot of other things around our school system. I believe that was updated, if I'm not sure, in 1993 when they did the renovation of
That's
those
correct.
lights. So therefore, those lights.
30
are
years
That's one thing I think that we could look at. This board and our joint facility committee had looked at spending $8 million at West, or give or take, 42 million at East, give or take a couple million. I think those are projects that when the time comes to actually get those done, that you can roll those into there.
But I don't think we need to take off the musical instruments.
I listen, me either. I didn't.
we
You've
need
never
at
heard me
least-
say anything about the musical instruments.
Okay.
Yeah, and
I know.
I
I just want to say when we're looking at it.
But I think the same thing that Mr. Wood has said, the same thing that Ms. Case has said about the softball, whatever, the gym, air conditioned, the same thing is true with, now Hendersonville, thankfully, is going to have updated 21st century lighting and sound. So there is something to be said for equitability.
Sure.
So you can't just throw it off.
right.
I'm not saying
that's
throw it
so
off.
true for the baseball, the gyms, the softball, and the auditorium. So let's be careful. I'm not saying we have to do it, but don't just throw it off yet.
You would have never
Wait.
heard me say any of this if 1.7 didn't get pulled from this year's budget to replace to fix Rugby and Upward. I never would have. I know that those systems are critical. I know that's kind of a heartbeat of the school when they get to do their plays, and the Rugby does a phenomenal play every year. I understand it. I was in theater myself actually, but in baseball I love. But there has to be priorities when things are changed.
Well,
Last 10
then-
years has been pretty easy, but right now it's
My
not gonna be
understanding
easy.
is Steve has pulled that, it's on hold, and you're saying it's gone. Now, I'm not talking about the whole 4 point.
I think the 1.7 is on hold.
You're saying it's on hold, and I'm saying they are gonna.
The
get to release it.
1.7, but not the 4.6 that we were supposed to get each and every year.
Well, I know that, I agree with that.
The
But the
1.7
1.7 for rugby and upward and whatever the other.
Project
one was.
Empower.
It's on
Project
hold to
Empower.
see what his budget
That's right, and
shortfall
I
is for
think
his
we
sales
will
tax.
get that.
I hope so.
And he said we're definitely going to work to get that replaced.
I
He
hope
did-
I
he
think
did
we
say
will get that,
I
and
hope
we
so.
will know more whether we will or won't by January.
Yeah.
Right.
If we get it, then that answers some of those questions.
Right,
that
but
you're
I just feel like it's really hard to upgrade sound and lighting, which I think is extremely, every one of my kids are in the arts and in theater, and it's very important. But when I can't look at a parent in their eyes and say, your school is the safest we can make it, I cannot turn around and put that money into sound and lighting.
But we can wait till January to
Absolutely.
to see.
Yeah.
If we comes down between doing rugby and upward, I'd prefer rugby. It's less expensive, first of all, and it serves more students. They are more, I believe, that we never know where we'd have a problem.
Well, and we
Upward we've
can't,
already
yeah,
cut,
we
to
can't
be
lock
honest.
down rugby like we have upward. I mean, it's not
Upward still can be locked down.
convenient, you
Well, we-
know, like seeing them come in, but rugby
We cut
is.
the upward project down by $800,000,
Oh, I know.
I believe, as well.
Yes, we did.
To redo the cafeteria or something like that.
Yes,
So
we did.
rugby, I agree. I think rugby, I thought rugby was more expensive, but $500,000, to me, you get it done. You get it done. Once you get the money back from the county commissioners, great. Then we can use that money to replace some of these things. But
We will bring that to you on Monday.
And what we'll try to do is we'll get something out to you, hopefully before the meeting on Monday, so you can have some ideas that when you kind of see it, that we can discuss it on Monday when we do the budget. This will be the total budget allocation, but what I think that you will see differently, if I know this is not a voting, but a discussion, just give me your opinion very quickly, is the 1 million will not be in the 29, 600 of that will be added to last year, and then we'll take the 400 and put it in the capital outlay. So that'll be 1.9 in the capital outlay for that 400, and the 600 will be in the current expense.
yeah, I think it's a little dangerous to do that because so current expense is a recurring fund, right? Capital outlay is kind of this, it's a moving target every year. And so I think if you start pulling, if I think you're okay to leave it as COVID, whatever funds, flexibility funds in your current expense. Because if you start moving it to capital outlay, then it's not a current expense. Then you're looking next year, it's 28,928, right?
I think, to be honest with you, Mr. Craven, my conversation with Mr. Wyatt has always been, is he looks at the bottom number.
Sure.
We divide it up. I know that we always talk about current expense and capital, but I think when he looks at our total budget, he's saying that last year or this year, it's 30,828,000. What increase are they going to get on 30,828,000? He's always looked at that $1 million as a continual type budget. So I would say the million, no matter where it's going to be allocated, will be basically the expectation, and that's what we got last year. And then if we get more, it will be more than the 3828. It will be us to where we put it.
Can you move it after it's
So, okay. So it's important that next week, what we submit to the county does have a current expense and capital breakdown. We have to put that request out there. If we then want to make any changes to that during the year, we have to go to the commissioners and request that they make that change to it. So yes, it can be done, but it would be one of those things that we would want to do one time.
So
So if we put it in capital now, if we're talking about using half of that 400 for the rugby project, along with the other $200,000 or $300,000 of the other projects, then probably want to start with it over there on the capital side. We can get into the whole charter school implication as well as whether it's
Oh,
direct
yeah.
expense or
and I,
because it cuts down the charter school amount, right?
And I just believe,
Can we just move
I
it?
just believe $400,000 are going to be this year more stuff, more fixing roofs, more heaters,
It's,
just like you
it's
said.
always going to be stuff. It's not going to be,
It's not going to be
shouldn't
personnel.
people.
No. And
Um,
I think that's why I would just like to go ahead and start with it there. If all of a sudden, like I said, we got to hire an additional special ed teacher, we'll go to the county commissioners, ask to move it. But in my conversation with Mr. Wyatt is he's always taken those two lines, current expense and capital, and that's where he starts. So to him, it's I talk about, now you give me this much in current. No, don't start there. You know, here's the bottom line, and here's what I can do to help the school system. And so,
But there are other things that enter into whether we get to, how we get to keep and or spend. It depends on which line item it's
Sure.
current and capital. So I think state capital,
you say move that 400 to capital?
the capital I do.
So that would lower the amount that charter schools would get because that's only on current, correct? If we were to leave it in current and needed to do a budget amendment and send that to the Board of Commissioners come January, that's a one-time, do they need to vote on that, or is that just a checkbox, let's go?
I don't know exactly what their process is for approving it, but we have to request it of them. Switch that from current to capital or capital to current, either direction.
and I think the reason that it needs to be in capital as well is, let's be honest, this whole discussion, we didn't spend much talking about 29 million, but we spent 2 hours talking about 1.5. And so the issue that we have is basically the reason of that is because of that third line there is because, yes,
Before we talk
unfortunately,
about 29 million, we can.
they're holding the Mr. T money, which that's why I think it needs to go to capital, because we don't have access to that 4 million. Granted, we can't do all of it, but there may be projects that are on that list that all of a sudden come up that we need to go ahead and put it in there.
One quick update. Dr. King did text me as we were talking. For student packets and information that was mailed home, we're talking about 20% of our student population. So it's about 2,700 kids. Or information that went home kind of in a paper pencil fashion. So
Wasn't it like $13,000 in postage or something?
I know she's collecting the posted numbers total moving
That
forward. So
includes
yeah.
K2 though. They were all paper.
No.
To start with,
No.
and then we expanded them
Oh, did we?
to
Okay.
remote as well.
Okay.
So
Elementary didn't.
They sent home, well, they did do some paper stuff, but then they
We've
sent
been
home
online.
from, but
Well, but they had extra.
they had a little time before we went that way.
What is Buncomb's, I've been told, I don't know this, that they have a one-to-one and send technology home with their kids, did last year. Buncombe parents I've talked to say, oh, well, they already had them. We already bring them home. Do they have some?
We're in the process right now. I'm working with other superintendents. I'm not did get a chance to talk to Dr. Baldwin to verify that. I have talked to other school systems. Of course, Transylvania right next door is one of the very first ones to do it years and years and years ago. That's why the kids are sitting there with a computer and they have a snow day and you see they're just making it up that day virtually, is because the computers are already at home with the children.
Well, that's my question. Do those people that have been doing that, do they lose 10% of them, 20% of them, 5% damage?
Talk to, and this will be something else that if we decide to make this move, the board will need to decide basically how you want to handle that. I talked to the superintendent of McDowell County. They let computers go home with children, carrying them back and forth, grades 6 through 12. And every child pays a small amount of insurance money that takes care of the insurance. So if something's broke, there's insurance, and then the kids pay almost like a travel fee. Of course, any child who can't afford it, the school system will certainly take care of it with other types of funds, but there's a small type of insurance fund that they pay, because most of the time what he says it's pop screens and crack screens are what you're generally replacing on these things, and that they have insurance money to help pay for that.
But do we have insurance that covers them now, correct? Do we?
Not individual, just a technology, because we've been keeping them at school. No, we have basically property insurance, but we have a $5,000 deductible. So there's got to be a lot of damage.
Might beat that this year though.
Yeah. We have to have
1,000 devices out.
Yeah,
You
that's
might-
true. Well, I hope not. But yeah, there's a
Oh,
$5,000 deductible we have on our insurance.
So how many kids did not have the internet to use the Chromebooks? Do we know that?
I was told about 2 per class when I was talking to those teachers. They were like, 2 of my kids don't have access to internet.
So I know Morris is giving it for like $34 a month to use the internet somehow. I don't know how that works. but-
In this case, I think that is one of the things that that right now, when we got into this, that we didn't know, and right now we're still collecting numbers on it. I can't tell you exactly. I know the schools can tell you what children are online and what children are getting things mailed to them. We don't know what the issue is. Does Morris Broadband not even go there? It doesn't even come close.
Who's going to pay the deposit?
And then is Morris Broadband there? But when the parent lost their job, we've had a couple people
Right.
request hotspots that were on it, but when both parents lost their jobs, then therefore they're asking for that was a monthly bill that they did away with. So, and I think it just varies greatly from where the school's at, where the parents live, and also basically the socioeconomic of the schools. And so it's hard to say exactly what is it at per school. I know that we've looked at it, and when you turn around and say that when we first started this at the very first, and 20% is roughly 20% of our kids, and I know she's saying 2 per class, which that's great for those classes, but it varies to me because 20% is really kind of the rule of thumb that I've been using. And so
20%.
that's where we've got to start from and come up with a plan. And you asked very quickly, and I know we're getting off the weeds of a budget and talking about, things we'll certainly again talk about Monday night. But that's part of the remote learning plan, is to come up with a plan on what are you going to do to address these. And it's also the plan that's why we're getting technology money. When you'll talk about it, and Bernie will talk about that list there on everything the state's given us. He's got a nice little diagram chart there. It looks like a John Madden football play, but there's money there for hotspots. There's money there for more or broadband. There's money for connectivity. There's all this different types of funds to help us with the remote plan. So we'll certainly have a talk about that. So what we're going to do for you, this is not a vote. What we'll do for you is bring you a revised capital budget with some revised numbers regarding how we would like to ask that money, and bring that back to you Monday, and we'll try to get it to you early.
All right. Move that we go out of the board budget workshop.
So move.
Second.
Second.
All those approved say aye.
Aye.
See you Monday.